We need to talk about ideas, good ones and bad ones. We need to learn stuff about the world. We need an honest, intelligent, thought-provoking, and entertaining review of what the hell happened on this planet in the last 7 days. We need to sit back and listen to the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove.
Hello and welcome back, dear listener, the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove. I'm Trevor, aka the Iron Fist. Just joining in the last few minutes and tapping furiously at his keyboard is Scott the Velvet Glove. How are you, Scott? Hopefully I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm okay. Just running a little late. Anyway.
Very good.
How are you both?
Toting up the dollars for the Catholic primary schools and making sure they get every cent of government largesse that they can get their hands on.
Exactly.
So, yes. And, well, don't ask Joe the tech guy how he is, because Joe has a number of health issues just mounting up in addition to his Crohn's disease. So share him if you want to, Joe. Otherwise, tell people that you're perfectly, well, you're not fine, but you don't want to talk about it.
I'm on the road to mending, so
good.
All good.
Yeah. So, yeah, just a bunch of invalids here. Two guys with Crohn's disease, one with MS, and Joe, you're racking up other ones along the way. Crikey. Yeah, if you're in the chat room, say hello, and we will endeavour to incorporate your comments. Gentlemen, I'm up for any diversions that you want to make, but I was going to talk a bit about Gaza and Lebanon and just people being blown up. And
it's all right, Trump's going to fix it.
Yeah, well,
the war will be over in 5 minutes.
Well, maybe the Russia-Ukrainian war, he might be keen to get that one finished so he can concentrate on the Gaza war, which is not even a war because it's just a massacre, and the China war. That's the one
you've noticed his pick for Israeli ambassador doesn't believe in the West Bank?
Of course not. Of course not. So he's picked a few people, Scott, and the word is that they're pretty crazy. I haven't looked at the details of these people. I've seen snippets. Like Marco Rubio was he's got like Kissinger's role, isn't that right?
Secretary of State.
Yeah, and he's absolutely...
he doesn't like China at all.
No, he's quite pro-Israel.
RFK Jr. as health secretary?
Yes. And Elon Musk...
Anti-vaxxer, anti-fluoride.
Yes.
Yeah, Elmo and Vivek Ramaswamy as the Department of Department of Governmental Efficiency.
Yes.
Which just happens to spell out some cryptocurrency that Elon was touting.
Right, yep. And, a Department of Government Efficiency that starts with two bosses.
Yeah. And actually has zero power.
Yes.
As somebody has said... he's given Elon the second controller but not plugged it in.
Right.
Because, when you're playing video games and the kid's there nagging you because they want to play as well, you hand them the second controller but you don't plug it in, so they think they're playing the game,
right? But
actually they're not.
Yes. Vivek Ramaswamy, another sort of tech. Is he a billionaire? If he's not, he's close to it.
I think so. I don't know.
Yeah, they're going to be running Department of Government Efficiency.
And then apparently...
going to cut the budget by $2 trillion per annum, which is ridiculous.
Yes.
Because, like it was said, just I forget who was talking about it, but he said that only 15% of the federal budget goes on wages. So, if you're hoping to do that through government efficiency of cutting people, you've got to spend, you're going to have to sack everyone.
No. So they're going to get rid of veteran health care.
Mm.
Because, that's a large expense they don't need to worry about. And they're going to get rid of the Department of Education. Mm-hmm. They're going to sell off NOAA.
What's NOAA?
National Oceanic, I think, and Atmospheric Administration. I don't know. Yep. It's their weather people, basically.
Yeah, who needs that? Yep.
They want to privatise that.
Yep. Just the idea that these these tech billionaires are such magnificent operators of businesses.
Yeah, but
and they're therefore going to be fantastic operators of government departments. The first part's not true, and neither is the second part.
Look at how they got their money, how they got their start in life. Like, they were both inheritors. They inherited great big amounts of money from their parents.
And screwed over, at least in Elon Musk's case, a bunch of people.
Absolutely he did.
Yeah. So
apparently there was some quiz show where they asked a bunch of which of these companies didn't Elon Musk start? And there was a list of companies, and then the odd one out was supposed to be Amazon, but also in there was
Tesla,
which
and
of course,
PayPal.
Yeah. Well, PayPal was a merger.
Right. He was part of some other group that he'd sort of come in later on after other people had started it as well. He comes in and bullies his way.
Well, no, he'd set up X.com, which was an online banking. He seems to have a liking for the letter X. And then that merged or was bought out by PayPal, which is how he ended up at PayPal. But yeah, Tesla he bought out, and part of the buying out deal was that he could rewrite the company history.
Yeah. So, terrible people. And they're just going to be put in charge, and just the numbskulls who think this is going to be great. Anyway, if you're in the chat room, say hello. If you're one of the patrons, your name is being scrolled down the bottom. Thank you to the patrons. Let that go for a bit longer and then turned off. So, yeah. Anything else you want to say about Trump, Scott, or America in general? I didn't have anything else.
As much as I hate to admit it, I think you're right. I think we are witnessing the first opening salvos of the decline of the American empire. I think it is going to fall apart now. And it depends on how long the electorate takes to wake up to it. I said to you and your wife a few years ago, I said that I think America was 2 or 3 bad decisions away from becoming the Republic of Gilead. The first bad decision was the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. The second bad decision was re-electing this dickhead. So we just got to find out.
The first bad decision was Citizens United.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Which has led to this.
Anyway, it's just one of those things. I do hope that they manage to wake up to themselves before it's too late.
The people who say here, we're safe in our nice little secular way of life, and we need to look to America because they're playing the long game. The Christian nationalists, and they are trying to do it here. They are training up the next politicians, the next lawyers, the next judges. They would very much... we don't have a Supreme Court like they do in America that they can stack in quite the same way.
The irony is that the right complains about cultural Marxism, which is basically following the Gramsci model that you infiltrate the institutions and change the culture by controlling the institutions. And the right...
precisely what the right has done in the US.
The right is claiming that the left has done that in universities. But in actual fact, it's the right that has infiltrated positions of power that have enabled a change of culture. So in media, in the way that... just infiltration of government positions, for starters, infiltration of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, for that matter. Like in all manner of walks of life in institutions full of Christians who are, the 7 mountains are basically what they're working on. So that's the irony of this cultural Marxism, is it's actually the right that's been successful in the Gramsci model. But...
behind every accusation
is
a confession.
True, Joe. True. Yeah, true. Yeah. John says there's a 50-50 chance Trump will tank the US economy. So,
well, that's a very distinct possibility. I think that at the very least they've signed up for a massive wave of inflation because, when you go into Walmart, most of the stuff is made in China. So if he slaps a 60% tariff on it, and he's going to end up with Walmart prices will go through the roof, which will result in inflation across the country, which will result in the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates higher for longer, which will end up tanking the US economy.
But you know what? If over the next 4 years the stock market improved 15% per annum per year, people would go, well, he was great for the economy. But the financial economy is not the real economy.
No.
So Wall Street is not High Street. And so it who knows? It wouldn't surprise.
And that's the problem at the moment with for Biden. It is that Wall Street is doing really well. But the average punter was complaining about the price of their eggs.
Yes.
To which I saw some comedian saying, who's eating all these fucking eggs?
There was an egg shortage about 18 months ago in the States.
There was.
Yeah. The bird flu.
And did you see the bird flu? There's been a slaughter of a lot of birds. Did you see the Mexican president saying, we welcome Trump. If he's going to start rounding up and deporting citizens, then there's a few thousand Americans in Mexico that will round up and deport.
Oh, okay. Come and collect them. Yes. Because there'd be a large expat community.
Absolutely.
Living in Mexico on the cheap.
Yep.
In the way that British live in Spain on the cheap. And Australians live in Bali on the cheap.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Essential Lord Don, what does he say? The Christian lobbies only care about our immortal souls and they will take away all our human rights to do so. We should be grateful they care so much. A bit of sarcasm from Essential Lord Don.
Well, I don't care so much about the Christian lobby.
Just before we finish on Trump, this was when he announced what he was doing with Elon Musk. This is verbatim his statement. I am pleased to announce that the great Elon Musk, working in conjunction with American patriot Vivek Ramaswamy, will lead the Department of Government Efficiency. Together, these two wonderful Americans will pave the way for my administration to dismantle government bureaucracy, slash excess regulations, cut wasteful expenditures, and restructure federal agencies essential to the Save America movement.
Yeah, but see, what he's actually aiming to do is to strip away any sort of teeth that the environment regulations have still got.
Yeah.
He's going to strip them away. He's going to make drill, baby, drill a motto that everyone's got to live by. He's...
But just the description, I'm pleased to announce that the great Elon Musk, it's like the wizard. It's like announcing the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't look behind the curtain.
No. Not enough Totos around.
Yeah.
Looking at curtains. Yeah. Oh, what else have we got to talk about here? I've got to get a bit closer so I can see the screen. It's off to the side. We'll talk a bit about Gaza. Actually, did you guys see that Biden has authorised Zelensky to use long-range
missiles against Russia.
On Russia?
No.
Yeah. Which, just the statement itself, the President of the USA has authorised the President of the Ukraine about how he can use missiles against another country, which is ludicrous to start with.
They are American-made and supplied missiles.
Yep.
So
Yes.
I understand that they actually were worried about it provoking the Russians into potentially using battlefield nukes and that sort of stuff.
Well, they were also worried that America would be seen as a legitimate target. That was the real worry. Was the Russians had said, if you start using American weapons, we're considering it an act of war by America.
Yeah, well, the Russians have said If that's the case, NATO is involved as far as the Russians are concerned. And they've said that quite clearly. If you start using long-range ballistic missiles, we will consider that NATO involvement. And the US, whatever department said, yeah, we've authorised Zelensky to do this, and no, we don't think that that's going to change the nature of the conflict in any way. So,
well, but on the flip side, Russia has been quite happily hiding behind their international lines to launch attacks on the Ukraine, going, ha, 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 you can't use your decent weapons to attack us back here. So I think it's perfectly valid if these are launching bases for attacks on the Ukraine to be hit by long-range weapons, no matter where they come from.
Do you agree with me that Ukraine should now give in and try and negotiate the current?
No, I don't think that. I don't think they should.
You haven't reached the point yet.
No, I don't think they have, because if you actually negotiate with that prick, he runs behind his borders, licks his wounds, rebuilds his army, and comes back in to take another little piece of it.
They've
in
got
that case,
2 months
you'd
to
never
grab as much land as possible before Trump comes in and forces them to negotiate.
Scott, on the basis of that argument, there's no point in any sides ever reaching an armistice in any war.
Not if you've got a proven liar on the other side. He has lied
in any war
repeatedly.
where there's proven liars.
He has repeatedly
name a war
lied
that didn't have proven liars.
I don't know. But, let's go back to the history of armistices. You had an armistice in 1918 that everyone's honestly believed was a European civil war that started in 1944, was finished in 1945 by the outside European powers finally putting an end to it. You had an armistice that was signed at the end of the Korean War, which it has held for a very long time, but they are still technically at war, and you've got the North Koreans. Honestly, you've got the North Koreans. Wouldn't the
Korean solution be a good one for Ukraine right now?
It would be if it would actually hold, but I don't think it's going to hold with that prick.
Was the North Korean regime at the time a bunch of proven liars?
No, they weren't a bunch of proven liars.
Okay.
They weren't. They were barely a young country that had started out life.
Just to throw more young Ukrainian. The Ukrainians themselves don't want to fight. They're done.
I know they don't want to fight. They're done. They've had a gutful. They want something to end
human life.
They want something to end it.
They want, yes.
But I don't believe that they can actually go to the negotiating table just yet. They've got to they should be able to use a few of these long-range weapons, blast the Russians out of their bunkers and that sort of stuff. Then they can actually say to that prick, now it's time to talk.
Scott, if you had a 25-year-old son or daughter...
I don't have any kids.
But if you put yourself in that position...
Yeah.
Would you want them being sent off to that front line, arguing over some mud?
I wouldn't want them to be sent to a front
Ukraine,
line. I was born in Australia, not in Ukraine.
Yeah, but rather than agree to a ceasefire and hope for the best.
Would you rather have them living under a Putin administration compared to dying for the possibility of getting some freedom?
They're the ones who are trapped behind enemy lines at the moment.
The ones who are in the various oblasts, the Donbass, where the
territory that's already taken.
Yeah,
Are they fighting back in those periods? Are they fighting there now?
No. So there's been a lot of suppression of militants.
Yeah.
So there has been some.
I'd be telling them stop fighting, lay low, and try and make a new life.
Even if there's a new life, you're still going to get rounded up by the FSB and tortured.
I can't believe that out of all these options, a ceasefire on the current lines is just not the option.
It's not the option because he has proven time and time again that he doesn't give a shit about what he signs up to.
A ceasefire
you can say
possibly
it on the other side as well. The Ukrainians are just as guilty.
Yeah, I know they're just as
signed
guilty.
up to
They're
Minsk
both as,
and admitted
they're both as bad as each other.
And admitted they had no intention of complying with the Minsk agreement. So Putin did. He said, "That's what I want." It was the Ukrainians who said, "Well,
Putin wasn't involved in the Minsk agreement, was he?
What was the Minsk agreement?
What do you mean he wasn't?
Wasn't that the 1990s one where they signed over their nuclear weapons?
No, the Minsk agreement was the one to sort out this Donbass area for a ceasefire.
Right.
So and basically, Ukraine said, "Well, it was never our intention to agree with that. We were just stalling because the terms of it they never started working on." At some point, they've got to give in, and throwing young bodies into the meat grinder is a crime, a war crime by the Ukrainians against their own people. Terrible. Anyway, we'll agree to disagree.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will agree to disagree. It's just I think you're seeing the world through rose-coloured glasses. You know,
how's that rose-coloured? I'm saying you've lost. Give in. That's
the
realistic glasses, rather than the rose-coloured ones that say the rose-coloured glasses are the ones that say keep fighting because there's something to be gained from this.
No,
that's the rose-coloured glass.
The rose-coloured glasses you're looking on is you honestly believe that Vladimir Putin is a good guy. He's not a good guy. He's a prick.
No, I don't think he's a good guy.
Or that he'll honour any agreement.
I
exactly.
think
any ceasefire.
I think he considers himself a patriot.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably does consider himself a patriot, which is fine as long as he stays on the Russian side of the border.
I've never said
he honestly think that he honestly believes that Ukraine is part of Russia.
He thinks it should be.
Yeah, yes. I know. He thinks it should be, which is wrong.
They were going to seize Kyiv in 2 days.
This war was supposed to be over within a fortnight.
Yep.
It's now 2 years on, and we are still fighting. They are still fighting about it.
They should stop. I'm saying they should stop.
So should the Russians. The Russians should actually lay down their arms and walk away.
Yep.
I honestly believe that you cannot just put all this on Ukraine because the Russians were the ones that fired the first shots. They were the ones that actually marched into the east. They originally aimed.
Your Ukrainians weren't Kiev. Firing shots in the Donbass,
but they were firing against those that had tried to actually take the Donbass for Russia.
Separatists.
They were separatists. The Ukrainians were fighting against
them.
They
were
separatist
like
ethnic conflict. They were firing.
The little green men separatists in the peninsula.
One man's separatists is another man's. I don't know.
Chechens.
Inspired. We're just going to go around in circles. I can tell. I can't. I just. And what are we in the? John says, sadly, I fundamentally disagree. Russia invaded a sovereign country, and to surrender will just encourage Putin.
It will.
Encourage him to what?
It'll encourage him to look at
China.
He will look at those three northern countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. He will look at those three and he'll say, "Oh, they really should never have been handed over. They really should never have gained their independence when the Soviet Union fell. I think they should remain part of Russia." And he will probably try and invade them.
Do you know what? If you're the Ukrainians and you keep the line where it is, you would say, I don't give a shit about those other countries. I want the line here and I want to stop killing Ukrainians. That's what I would say if I was in charge of the Ukraine. I'd say I don't care about the risks to these other countries.
Once they had moved around and once they'd taken all those other little countries, then they'd actually say, well, Ukraine still isn't solved. We're going to take it back.
Well,
we're going to have the Russian ruble will be the currency of the area, and that'll be it.
You could say that in any circumstance. Say Russia withdrew back to the original boundaries. you could still say, well, they're going to invade again next week.
Absolutely.
So
which is why Ukraine wants to be part of NATO.
You could say that whatever scenario you come up with.
Which is why that those two traditionally neutral countries joined NATO. Because they are shit scared of Russia.
And NATO should have said, no, we need a neutral space. You, as a sovereign country, are quite entitled to want to join NATO. But we, as NATO,
you
are
can be
entitled
invaded.
to say,
we don't care. We're not going to do anything about it.
No, because of the risk. This isn't some crackpot Trevor idea. You know that I'm speaking about what dozens of well-credentialed
diplomats have said for a very long time.
From Henry Kissinger downwards.
I agree.
So what I'm saying is the orthodox view.
Yeah, but
it's not unorthodox.
It's the domino effect. If we don't stop them invading the Ukraine, then they'll invade there. Sorry, wasn't that Kissinger?
Well, you're claiming the domino effect. I'm saying there's no domino. You're the one saying there's a domino.
No, Henry Kissinger said there was a domino. So he's perfectly happy with the dominoes in Southeast Asia, but he doesn't believe it about Russia.
Well, all I'm saying is this is the orthodox viewpoint where I'm not out of the ordinary here. What I'm saying is completely in line.
What I'm saying is Russia's neighbours are afraid of Russia and want to join NATO for a perfectly good reason.
Absolutely. Don't deny that for a second. But NATO should have said no, because we need a neutral barrier between us and them. And by you joining us, that's not good. So, yes, we fully understand you wanting to join. But no, it's like Mexico saying we want to join with China in some defence pact because we're worried about America invading.
If the US were threatening to invade, absolutely.
Okay. And really, you'd say to Mexico, that's not a good idea to join with China because that's just going to increase tensions. Like, there are some times where you say, I know what you want, but you can't have it. I know from your personal selfish point of view, that's what you want, but it's not good.
If America wasn't building a wall to stop the Mexicans coming in, I might believe it, but...
Yeah. Okay. Why should Wayne Siemens, why should Ukraine give up their country? Well, they should give up what they've lost already because it's killing their people to maintain it. In some wars, guess what? You lose, you dust yourself off and you set a new line. So that's why they should give up, because they're fighting a country that is way too big for them. They have no chance of winning. They are just killing off a generation
should have just given up.
Of Ukrainians. Who's that?
France in 1940 should have just given up. They were fighting a country that was far too big, far too powerful.
Well, they had allies either coming and on board or that they could think would come. So, yeah. Why doesn't Russia surrender? Because they want the land they have invaded. Correct. Don't disagree with that. They're not going to give in. They're too big. Anyway.
So might is right, is it, Trevor?
You've got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Or a man's got to know his limitations. And when you're getting beaten up badly, what is? I'm sure. Is it? What's that art of war? Chinese.
Sun Tzu.
Yeah, I'm sure at some point it would be. I've never read him or heard.
Never read it.
But I'm sure somewhere in there, if you're getting the shit beaten out of you, you would go back and regroup and live to fight another day.
I don't think it actually goes into that. It's basically a hell of a lot of advice on how you actually to fight a war and that type of thing, more so than surrender in a war.
Yeah, well.
Anyway. It's one of those things, like, the whole thing started off with the Ukrainians were actually dragging out of the war, out of the basements of their museums and that sort of stuff, weapons that were used in the 1914 battles. These were Vickers machine guns and that type of thing. They were using them. They were finding they were actually quite effective. And then the Yanks actually said, gee, these guys are actually putting up a decent fight.
These plucky Ukrainians.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they did actually admire the way they were actually prepared, that they were prepared to put their lives on the line and that sort of stuff to fight for their country. So that's where the first lot of American aid started to arrive. And then the Russians were pushed back, and they said, "Okay, we're going to pour some more money and weapons into this," and that sort of thing. Now,
well, we've spent a lot of time and effort installing a pro-Western government here. We don't want them to fall over.
That was a pro-Western government that won a genuine election. Now, I'm not going to argue with you about the last guy and that sort of stuff. He was pro-Russian. I think clearly that the people did not want to have the Russians involved because they have very long memories of the Soviet Union, and the Soviets were not nice political masters, and they weren't prepared to accept a pro-Russian president. So they pulled him down. Now, who was behind that revolution? I don't know, but the revolution worked. It did actually end up resulting in Zelensky winning that election. So Zelensky won the election. I don't think he was actually prepared for it and that sort of stuff. He didn't actually believe the Russians were coming, despite having warnings from the CIA and everything else. He didn't believe it, and then they invaded. But rather than actually accepting the Americans' offer, which was to fly him out of there, he says he didn't need a ride, he needs ammunition. And that's what he wanted to do. He just wanted ammunition to stand up and fight the Russians.
In the chat room, Wayne says, the Americans were prepared to give the top half of Australia to Japan during World War II, but Australians wouldn't stand for that.
No, that's not the case. That's not the case.
Ukrainians shouldn't stand for that sort of thing either.
That's not the case. The
I
Americans
recall the fall of Singapore, and we just said, "Fair enough, you've won. It's yours."
That was the
we'll live to fight another day.
That was the Brisbane line that was actually taken over by the Australian government. They were prepared to defend basically south of Brisbane. That was the Brisbane line. That was the Australian government actually wanted that, not the Americans. When the Americans got involved in the war, which was in December 1940. They actually came down here. What was his name? MacArthur came down here from the Philippines and that sort of stuff, and he was convinced he'd find an army here. He found a rabble and that sort of stuff, and he spent a fair bit of time trying to coax the Australians into a more professional defence force. So anyway, it is what it is. The Brisbane line was actually something that was actually authored by the Australian government, not the American government. Anyway, I agree with you, though. It is something that would have been pretty abhorrent for us to accept.
But if some amazingly powerful force had invaded Australia and worked its way down and was just overwhelmingly superior and got to the Brisbane line and said, we could keep going here, or tell you what, we'll do a peace deal and we'll stop here. If it was in the sort of mismatch of power that was happening with Ukraine and Russia, then we should say, rather than sending young men and women into a meat grinder just north of Brisbane, we should agree to a ceasefire and live to fight another day. But it never got to that point, so it's not a good analogy.
It never got to that, no. It's one of those things I just don't know,
I just love the way people are willing to throw other people into a meat grinder. Love it. Oh, you folks should fight to the last Ukrainian. Yeah. And there'll be none of you left, but you should do it anyway. When do people count more than land?
Say again?
When do people count more than land?
Well, I just think
when does
that
maintaining
land... Yeah, but that land being controlled by the Russians, you're still going to have Ukrainians living on that land, and they're going to be controlled by the Russian government.
Do you know what? The Russians, you could cut a deal. We'd say to the Russians, let the Ukrainians out. Anyone who wants to leave, come out. They'd probably agree to that because I wouldn't care. In fact, they'd be quite happy for that. Get rid of those pesky Ukrainians who don't want to be here. Yeah, sure, take them. We don't need them. We don't need bodies. So, yeah, part of a deal. Anybody here who doesn't want to stay, they can go.
I think the usual misinformation had happened. I think Putin's spies had told him that the Ukrainians welcome him with open arms. That the Ukrainians were just waiting to throw off the shackles of their overlords and wanted to be part of Russia. I think Putin was misinformed as to how willing Ukraine was to fight.
Maybe, but you could certainly argue that the ethnic Russians in the eastern Ukraine were quite happy for a Russian occupation, as were the people in Crimea, apparently.
Well, so, those that weren't were quickly rounded up and dealt with.
But it seems quite arguable that the people of Crimea were more than happy with the Russian takeover.
Well, I don't think that anyone ever legitimately asked them.
John says, so fundamentally, Trevor, you're not keen on the underdog. Well, it's not about being keen. It's about being realistic. Would you just move to New Zealand if China invaded Australia, Trevor? No. You'd see what happens. But when you get to the point of what we've got now with Ukraine and Russia, then you would organise a line of peace. You'd concede. Ask Putin. He has thrown 300,000 odd into trenches of eastern Ukraine that will never get home. I don't know with the numbers, John, where you get 300,000 from, but
I think that's based on the estimates from the United States. They're suggesting that total casualties on both sides is up to 300,000.
Yeah, so I don't know whether that's anywhere near the ballpark or not, because as you know, I refuse to trust those figures. But
it could be 250,000 died on the Russian side. It could be 50,000 died on the Ukrainian side. You're never going to know because neither side actually tells the deaths. Neither side actually tells the death statistics.
Russians generally are happy with Putin, John. Like sort of in terms of popularity, they're quite happy because things are going well in Russia. Ukrainians generally are not happy with Zelensky. We'll never get a poll for that, but there will never be a line of peace with Russia. They want the entire country. Well, in that case, we should never have had a peace in North and South Korea, and they should still be killing each other up there.
Well,
but there was a line drawn, and
American troops are still sitting on the DMZ, aren't they?
Well, but you could argue as part of a ceasefire for some sort of arrangement of some sort to help. Yeah.
It's one of those things. I think that Russia actually is genuine about this. The only way I would accept, well, it's not up to me, but if I was in Zelensky's position, what I would be strongly arguing for is membership of NATO, just to make sure that you are never going to cross the border again. Yeah,
the whole point with that, they can then put missiles. They can then put NATO missiles in Ukraine and point them at Moscow, and that's the whole point.
They've got NATO missiles in Poland. They've got NATO missiles in those three countries in the Baltics. They're probably going to have NATO missiles in Finland.
Well, they have NATO missiles now. What do you think those MLRSs are? Actually, they're rockets, not missiles, but yes.
Yeah, well, nuclear. Well, you know what? I've been using Mexico as an example of this. It's been the wrong example. It should have been California. Imagine California seceded from the Union and joined China, and then China wanted to start putting missiles on the Californian border aimed at Washington. That's more like the metaphor that we should be using. How would America react?
America wouldn't tolerate that.
They go nuts. So why do you expect the Russians to do any different?
Because the Russians are already surrounded by weapons.
Hypocritical position.
They are already surrounded. They are already surrounded by NATO weapons, all the way from Finland now down into southern Poland. Mm-hmm. They've all got NATO missiles down there. So I just think it would be very hypocritical of them to actually say, no, they can't go any further south.
And are there nukes there anyway?
I don't know if there's any nukes.
I don't think so.
I don't think the nukes are, I think the nukes are still in the United States.
Are there any nukes in Ukraine? I think that's the whole point. No.
No, but I mean, are they in Poland?
I don't know.
Are they in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania?
I'd be extremely surprised if they were.
I would say it's probably conventional troops, if anything.
Mm. So John says those numbers are well in the ballpark. Well, how would you know, John? This is, I think, the 300,000. You've got no idea. According to Russia, they have shot down the Ukrainian Air Force about 4 times over.
Yeah, the statistics are inflated.
Russian propaganda. Not like the other guys are involved in it. Event Horizon. This is good. Everyone's against me. No, I don't have a single supporter in the chat room. There's 12 people watching.
Because you're wrong.
and I am holding the orthodox view.
I know that, but what we have discovered with Putin is that he's not an orthodox player.
Does Trevor believe that Putin would move on Poland or one of the Baltic states given a ceasefire? Or would he dial away some of those countries also to placate Putin?
As in, would you?
Would I?
Yeah, would you give up the Baltic states?
The ones that are already part of NATO?
Yes.
Mm.
Well, Putin's not going to invade them because he knows that triggers NATO.
No, because there's the what's it gap.
The what's it gap?
Yeah, there's a really narrow piece of land between Kaliningrad and Russia.
I don't know enough about that, but the principle would be he's not going to invade a NATO country.
Basically, if he goes through Poland to create basically cut off the land bridge between Poland and the Baltic states, he could basically enfilade, trap the Baltic states and invade the Baltic states very easily. And stop NATO reinforcement.
These ones part of NATO?
Sorry? They are part of NATO. Yeah.
He's not going to invade a NATO country.
Mm.
Because he's not going to, because he knows it triggers NATO.
Yes.
So,
but the argument is he could basically win those countries more quickly than NATO could get troops there.
Yeah.
And NATO are fighting a bridgehead.
But John says that's a bad analogy. California has not voted for independence. Well, it's a hypothetical, John.
Texas.
So it's the whole point of a country that used to be part of Russia, mainly Ukraine, moving over to
it was never part
West.
of Russia. It was part of the Soviet Union.
It
was a very different place.
Well, was it ever part of Russia?
No. Oh,
no. Was it ever part of Russia?
Historically, maybe.
Yeah. So, but about analogy, California has not voted for independence. But the point of the analogy, John, is to show that it's a patch of land that was previously part of the Russian/Soviet Empire that, in the Russian eyes, has been subject to a colour revolution, and now they want to point weapons at them. The hypocrisy. If it was switched around the other way, America would be going nuts, and everybody would be saying
so
they're
America
quite entitled
was justified with the Bay of Pigs, then.
So, the point is, this is what the hypocrisy is, that people are saying this is outrageous, when if the shoe was on the other foot, it would be, well, of course, you can't allow that to happen. So, Murray Waper. Gosh, Murray's there. If Trump isn't going to back NATO, then NATO has a significantly weaker force. That may make further land grabs by Putin more attractive. So,
which is why.
Yeah, but
which is why those piss tapes are worth more than.
if Trump isn't going to back NATO, then NATO has a significantly weaker force. Well, that's true. That may make further land grabs by Putin more attractive. That makes it easier for him if he thinks that America's not going to get involved and uphold its part of NATO. Yeah, true. Yeah. But anyway, they're spoiling for a war with China. They're saving up their guns for that. Anyway, good to see you in the chat room, Murray.
It has been argued that China is actually eyeing up Manchuria. Because Russia is in a weakened state and China could quite easily grab some of its land back that it lost in Manchuria.
Why would they do that?
Because they can.
Well, they're quite enjoying having the gas station of Russia.
Yes.
They're loving the BRICS arrangement. They're able to defeat sanctions by the US with the new BRICS arrangement. So China, Russia, Iran, it's working out perfectly for them. They're best of mates. It's suiting them down to the ground. So, yeah. According to Peter Zeihan, Putin was planning on invading Poland after he had taken Ukraine. Who's Peter Zeihan? I don't know who that is. And Murray says there are definitely North Korean troops fighting for Russia. How do you know, Murray? Like, there could well be a few observers just figuring out what's it like in a real war. But for thousands of troops, no proof yet.
Peter Zeihan apparently claims him on his website to be an expert in geopolitics.
Don't we all? Who doesn't?
He's been featured in and cited by numerous newspapers and broadcasts, including Wall Street Journal, Forbes, blah-de-blah.
Yeah, we can trust them. Yeah.
Yes.
John can smell a beer coming on.
Mm-hmm.
Murray says, multiple reports coming through YT. Is that Young Turks? YT, is that Young Turks? Multiple reports coming through. Why wouldn't I have seen a single
YouTube,
one?
Otherwise.
Oh, YouTube. Well, Murray, I don't know that we can trust reports coming through YouTube. Have to be a bit, just because it shows
YouTube
some guys.
is the source of all truth.
Just because it might show some guys with Asian features in a Russian military outfit doesn't mean that they're not.
No, they're
Russian.
They're not actually in Russian uniform. They are in their own country's uniform.
Right, and they're clearly visible on the ground in the Ukraine.
I don't know where they are. There are shots and everything that are taken of them and that sort of thing. I couldn't tell you where they're from.
Yeah.
It could be that they're taken from... What's the word I'm groping for? They could be part of the Kursk region or something like that. They could be there. They could be in Ukraine.
They could be nowhere near there as well.
Say again?
They could be nowhere near there as well.
They could be nowhere near there. That's right.
Yep. Oh. We're running out of arguments on that topic.
It's one of those things. I just don't think... I don't know.
So in this entire chat room we've got going here of 8 people, everybody thinks that Ukraine should keep fighting and not agree to a ceasefire based on the current... Because there's one open, if you ceasefire and agree not to join NATO and concede the ground that's already lost, then Russia's offering a ceasefire. And nobody in the chat room is up for that, by the looks of things.
It's one of the... If you could actually trust the bastard, then you'd actually sign up to it. But I don't think you can trust him.
John says, now you are just doubting anything that doesn't agree with your narrative. I haven't seen a single piece of evidence, John. Not a single piece.
What evidence would convince you?
Name something and I'll tell you whether it would be convincing or not.
Dead Korean?
One?
Does it need to be more than one?
Well, it's supposed to be a battalion of infantry. Like, I fully accept there could be North Korean observers. There might be 100 just observers to sort of how do you fight a war, because it's not often you get to practice. So there could be, that sort of number. But actual troops engaged in on-the-ground fighting, no. So, I
mean, the problem
I don't
is...
know, name a scenario. Like if, for example, there was some battle and they successfully grabbed a whole bunch of POWs from the Russian side, and a few dozen of them were clearly North Koreans who had been involved. How do you tell
they're clearly North Korean?
Well, because the Ukrainians have captured them as prisoners of war, and somehow these people are paraded in front of us, not just by the Ukrainians, but as prisoners of war. Somehow it's proved.
By the way, that's against the Geneva Convention.
Well, you said what would convince me. I'm trying to come up with a scenario where
exactly.
Okay, well, if they captured a whole bunch of them, well, okay.
Yeah, but they're not allowed to parade them in front of cameras because that's against the Geneva Convention. So how do they prove to you?
Well, you give me a scenario and I'll say whether it's acceptable or not. Like, you come up with something.
I don't know. I presume, if they're sending them, they were saying that they're taking all identification off them and giving them clothes that make them look like they're a battalion from the Russian border with North Korea. So it would be very difficult. You could look at nutrition. You could look at a dead body and go, they're malnourished. They're more likely to be from North Korea than from that area of Russia. But I don't know. I don't know how we could provide evidence that isn't coming either from the Americans or from the Ukrainians.
Yeah, well, I guess if I don't know. But I'm willing to examine scenarios where it might be possible. So
so allegedly the Ukrainians have captured radio traffic of people speaking Korean with a not South Korean accent. But again, so if they released audio transcripts, you don't have the language skills to be able to tell. So how do you get those transcripts analysed?
You don't even know where they got it from.
No, exactly.
So, yeah, I agree. It probably would, in the murkiness of war, it probably would be difficult to prove it. Yeah.
You have to either rely or not rely on the intelligence reports from the belligerents.
So it will be, John, it's going to be difficult for you to prove. Maybe that beer isn't coming your way.
Are we doing a balance of probabilities beyond reasonable doubt?
Right. There are multiple reports of North Korean weapons being captured from destroyed vehicles. A North Korean weapon captured from destroyed vehicles. I don't think that's not proof of a North Korean infantry. Like North Korean weapons, maybe the Russians are using them. Where are AK-47s made?
Well, AK-47s used to be made in Russia. Now, I think they're
would
still
that be
made
proof
in
of
Russia.
They're made under license all over the place.
Yeah, they're made all over the planet.
Yeah.
Like
Besides,
the
they
Chinese
use
use.
AK-74s now, don't they?
Say again?
So they use AK-74s now, don't they?
I couldn't tell you.
So, yeah. Murray says, your happy face. Sad? What's that face? Pumpkin face?
No. I think that was a correction to the I've decided you're wrong. So there.
Right, okay. Well, it does, as you phrased it that way, Joe, it does seem difficult to imagine how proof will be provided unless there's some massive military success and somehow captured soldiers are then, in breach of the Geneva Convention, paraded in front of, I wonder if on the Ukrainian side, who are seeking the help of the West and wanting to increase the scale of the war, whether they would say to themselves, you know what, we've got these 100 North Korean soldiers, POWs, we'd love to present them to the world as proof of escalation of this drama, but gosh, Geneva Convention stops us, so we won't do it. You think that's likely?
No.
You think they would say, better not do that? It'd be a breach of the Geneva Convention. Of course they would trot them out and say, oh, look, North Koreans involved, therefore we need even more help from the West because those nasty guys are involved. They're not going to worry about the Geneva Convention, are they?
I don't know.
So all you need, I take it back, a successful skirmish and capture 100 or so North Korean soldiers. That'll do it. They'll present them. Yeah. Essential Lord Don, why don't we just ask the North Koreans? They wouldn't lie, surely. Name a side that doesn't lie. Essential Lord Don. Yeah. Right. Where are we? Speaking of lying, Gaza.
Yep.
It just gets uglier and uglier.
No, it doesn't.
This doesn't?
No. There's no proof that it happened.
Well, there is. That's the point.
But it's just coming out of the Palestinians.
No, it's coming out of the Israelis on their own social media. These guys
but they're liars.
are
Nobody
killing
believes
people, presenting their own evidence and boasting about how they're killing people. So we've got satellite imagery. We've got more than enough evidence.
Yeah, provided by the Americans. The Americans are just...
No, by everybody. So, Joe, you're being naughty. Because this is not, whether there's an atrocity going on in Gaza and can we prove it, does not equate to are there North Korean soldiers hiding in the bushes in the Kursk region. Yeah. Actually, let's just... this is from a British surgeon who was working, doing some work there in Gaza. Play this.
What I think I found particularly disturbing was that a bomb would drop maybe on a crowded, tented area, and then the drones would come down and... So the drones would come down and pick off civilians, children. And we had description after description. This is not, an occasional thing. This was day after day after day, operating on children who would say, I was lying on the ground after a bomb had dropped and this quadcopter came down and hovered over me and shot me. And that's clearly a deliberate act, and it was a persistent act, persistent targeting of civilians.
I mean, he could be lying, but you hear so many reports like this, and he has no reason to. So, bodies everywhere. And I mentioned before that, we don't see enough of the actual effect of all this on our TV screens. Like, I said there should be like 30 seconds or a minute of this, at least every news report, the latest atrocity in Gaza. Bloody Channel 7 News, they waste a minute every bulletin with an astrology report. Did you know that?
You're joking.
No. Somewhere about 15 minutes in before they go to a commercial break, they run through the astrology, whether you're a Virgo or Aquarius or Cancer, and what your how's your day shaping up for the next day.
For God's sake.
Yeah. So what does it say here? So by your logic, Trevor, Gaza should surrender and move out. Do you know what? If Israel was offering a ceasefire at the halfway point down Gaza or something like, if Israel said, all right, we're going to take the top 10% of Gaza and you guys don't get you guys can have the rest. Yes, Gaza, the Palestinians should accept the ceasefire. But you know what? There is no fucking ceasefire possible because it's not a war, it's a massacre. This is not two even sides. But yes, John, if Israel said to the Palestinians, we're willing to do a ceasefire, we're going to take this top strip here and we'll stop. And sure, do we trust the Israelis? No. Are they likely to come back in 5 years' time or 10 years' time and grab more? Yes. But if it would actually stop them temporarily for a few years while you gather yourself together, then yes, John, that is what they should do. All right. Murray says, speaking of wasting time, using half of the news to report on sport is uniquely Australian. It's a waste of time. Well, it's not quite half, is it?
I don't know. It seemed like an awful lot in the UK, but
yeah,
it's been a long time and I really don't remember.
Yeah. So, what should they be showing? Well, here is a 5-minute montage of what should be shown.
You're going to get us banned from YouTube.
Yeah, I am, aren't I? I can't do it, can I? I will be banned. That'll be a pain in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Patrons will get it.
You could, well, otherwise you could post links to Twitter feeds.
I'll put it up for the patrons. That'll go privately to them.
You can also email me that privately.
You can share it in the Discord as well.
Yeah. True. It just appalls me that I pick up the Courier Mail and all sorts of crap is in there and not a single mention of the latest atrocity.
Oh, youth crime. It's a big problem.
Yeah. Union bullies.
Maybe the Gazans are all young and causing crime, and that's why the Israelis invaded.
Yes. Essential Lord Don says, show us using interpretive dance. We haven't spoken about subs for a while. This one's safe.
Yeah.
Just change topics. Actually, do I have it before I move off Gaza? Was there anything I can say? Yes. No, I want to do the whole thing. I'm going to do a separate one just for the patrons.
Okay.
Which is also then going to talk about how much people who worked for the Unit 8200 Israel's largest and most controversial spying organisation. So there's a number of people who used to work for that organisation who are now in positions in the media in the US, like producers at CNN and stuff like that. And then there's various Israeli lobbying firms where people used to work for those groups and now have powerful positions, again, with New York Times and various other media outlets, as an explanation of why these events are not being shown in mainstream media is that there's a lot of pro-Israeli people in positions of power. And we talked right at the beginning of the show about cultural Marxism and the takeover of institutions, and certainly on the Israeli side, there's been a successful effort in that regard. Right, but that will have to be something quite separate, I think, to do justice to all that. Malcolm, how long have we got? 8:34. We're already over time, and Scott's got to go to bed. A quick one on subs.
This is the genius deal that our government has done. We've agreed to send billions of dollars to the Americans to help them improve their shipbuilding industry. They've agreed to sell us several Virginia-class submarines in the 2030s, but they've done so with the express proviso in the deal and in the legislation that no submarine can be sold to Australia unless the President certifies its sale, its transfer out of the US Navy, would not diminish the underwater capabilities of the US Navy. In other words, that they can spare it. They're already 17 Virginia-class submarines short of what they believe they need. They should be producing at least 2 a year. They're producing between 1.2 and 1.3. And to have any hope of providing Australia with submarines, they've got to up that to over 2.33. Maybe it all can be done, but we'll have very little influence on it. And unless it is, there is literally zero prospect of an American president certifying. In Washington, what is being widely canvassed and openly is the outcome where Australia gets no submarines at all. When the Americans turn around and say, we can't spare the subs, you're not getting any subs, we can't say you've double-crossed us or you've done the wrong thing, because if anyone was stupid enough to say that in Australia, I don't think we could. They'd just say, look, read it. It's up there, you know, in capitals. How anybody would think this was a smart deal to do is
not only is it ridiculously expensive for the ridiculously wrong submarine, it's just never going to happen. We need to have a little sweep on when will the AUKUS deal be cancelled? What year will it happen? Who will do it? And just...
Well, Trump might do it.
Yes, good point. Trump might do it.
If he doesn't realise what a good deal it is for them. But
Yes.
yeah, we're good at paying the American government money anyway. Because, you know, when we lowered our company tax, America basically has a deal that if an American company pays less than the American rate of company tax, then the company pays the difference in America.
Yes.
So we're all the American companies that trade in Australia at a lower rate, we're basically giving them our tax money.
Yes.
So Australia's used to paying the US government money.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah. So, a complete disaster.
Murray did point out the good news that The Onion have bought InfoWars.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really good.
Alex Jones, who was found guilty of lying, basically, libelling families, and has to give over $1.5 billion worth of assets. Basically, all of his IP and the website, I think, are now owned by The Onion, who are going to take it over as a spoof, silly site. But we'll also be doing something about gun deaths, gun violence.
My understanding is they're going to be doing it basically as a sarcastic look at the world and that sort of stuff, but they're also going to be finishing it off with a very serious report on gun deaths and violence and that type of It's probably the best thing that could have happened to it.
Well, we need to call it a day. I need to scurry off and find some military strategy books about examples of giving in wars and battles.
I'm just
Living
thinking
to fight
the
another
only way
day.
you're actually going to find that is if you've got an unconditional surrender.
And
I'm sure there are some good Italian books on it.
And I'll just, and does Italy still exist? Yeah, it does. Funny that. Yeah. So, so.
We didn't discuss Alan Jones.
No. Quite dangerous to do that, Murray, I would have thought, because everyone is presumed innocent. He's been charged with some sort of sexual
He's
assault
been
or
charged with a sexual assault, and allegedly one of the youngest victims is 17 years old.
Yes.
Okay, I was about to say I thought it was all adults, but because there was nothing in the reports that I read that said otherwise.
Yeah, but we're going to steer clear of that one.
Okay.
And, wait for the...
We'll wait until the outcome of the
wait for the
trial
court
and that
case to
sort of
blow
stuff.
over, yes.
That's it, yeah. Right, okay. Well, we'll be back next week to argue some more. Thanks for joining in the chat room. You're fantastic tonight. talk to you all next week. Bye for now.
And it's a good night from me.
And it's a good night from him.